Gen 1 of Pokémon is overhated. Or is it? There's so many memes online, both within Pokémon and the outer internet world, about how the first generation of Pokémon is the best, the only one that matters, and anything else that followed afterwards is either not as good or just flat out bad. People who are Gen 1ers, as they're often referred to, tend to focus on newer generations, more infamous Pokémon such as, yes, I'm just gonna go with them, Trubbish and Vanillish for being lazy and stupid, point to things like the mandatory EXP share as proof the games specifically have gotten worse, and look back at the first 151 Pokémon as perfection, with no notes being needed. However, a byproduct of this mindset being prevalent online is that in recent years there's been a real pushback on the original generation of Pokémon, and now there's a large percentage of people who actually think Gen 1 is overrated and use similar arguments to take down the generation. Pokémon like Voltorb and Magnemite are as bland as their Gen 5 counterparts. The lack of types compared to modern games make for a far simpler, perhaps more boring playing experience, and the general community has grown so much more since the mid-90s. Listen, my entire name and brand online is based around Gen 2. I'm a Totodile for God's sake, I'm a Gen 2 boy, but I was first introduced to Pokémon with Pokémon Blue. I am that old. So I've literally been around the entire time and find the idea of specific generations being the best redundant. If we're all being honest with ourselves, the majority of people think the first generation they played is the best one. Of course, there is exceptions to that rule, but generally, let's just say that that's right. Considering how popular Pokémon was at its inception, especially in terms of game sales, trading card sales, and how many people watched the anime, it's very understandable for Gen 1 to be the main generation people were introduced to. And, very importantly, almost all Pokémon that the general public know come from Gen 1. Most people who have no idea about Pokémon will still know about Pikachu, Charizard, Eevee, and a couple of others. Therefore, these Pokémon tend to get pushed the most and make sections of the community burn out quickly. For example, let's remember Sword and Shield. The amount of times we heard how great Leon's Charizard was makes you want to stick your face into Charizard's flame and end it all. Speaking of Charizard specifically, I feel like a lot of hate towards Gen 1 is aimed at the big guy, and I can't pretend I've not contributed to it in the past. I think Charizard is one of the most overrated Pokemon there is, and it's not the fault of itself. It's the fact that pretty much from X and Y, Charizard has become as crucial to the branding of the company as Pikachu. Every generation, with a special new way of playing, Charizard gets to be front and centre. Mega Evolution, new versions of Charizard. Gigantamax, new version of Charizard. Main Pokemon to the champion of the new games, it's Charizard. So as a result, you naturally start to get sick of seeing the same Pokemon from the past and want to see the new stuff, so you turn against the old. I honestly think X and Y have so much to blame for this mindset. Pokemon Black and White, Gen 5, basically reset the franchise. We went back to playing with a new group of Pokemon, where none of your old reliables from the past were usable until the post-game. And what happened? Generally, people hated it. I know Gen 5 now is considered to be one of the best, but you can see by what happened next that Game Freak and the Pokemon Company panicked. So when X and Y came out, they just went straight in to the Gen 1 nostalgia that, for me and many others, put us off. I wanted to play a new Pokemon game, not be playing with my original team from a decade and a half before with some new 3D graphics. I mean, for God's sake, they introduced Mega Evolution and didn't give a single one to a new Gen 6 Pokemon, but gave two to Charizard. So Gen 1 hate starts to roll and it never really stops. But is that fair? Of course not. The entire reason Pokemon is the single most successful media franchise in the world is thanks to the bedrock and success of the first generation. It's your opening gambit, your flagship, and if it wasn't appealing, it would have gone bust and faltered and died. But Pokemon captured the hearts and minds of literally the entire globe, and we can't just pretend that Gen 1 isn't essential to that. Do I think Red and Blue are the best games there are? No, not at all. I would actually go as far to say that the original Game Boy games, not Fire Red and Leaf Green, the original carts, are the single worst games in the franchise, speaking as someone in 2025. Every single iteration of the game has improved on the formula from both a graphical and mechanical way of playing. Do I think Gen 1 has the best Pokémon? I am literally named after a Pokémon not in the gen. Of course I don't think that. And do I think the franchise should have stopped at that 151? No, I think Pokémon has, largely, continued to grow and improve year on year. But do I also think Gen 1 is fantastic? Yes. Do I think Gen 1 has some of the best Pokémon ever? Yes, definitely. And do I think I wouldn't be here without Gen 1 and that Gen 1 has given me some of my fondest childhood memories? Without a doubt. So is Gen 1 of Pokémon overhated? Yes. Is Gen 1 of Pokémon also overrated? Yes. For me, it's like all aspects of Pokémon and life generally. There's good, there's bad, and there's stuff in the middle that nobody really cares about. Like Voltorb and Trubbish. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have enjoyed it. I know it's a topic that can kind of be a bit controversial or at the same time played out. So if you have any thoughts, please let me know down in the comments. If you have enjoyed it, please leave a like, comment and subscribe. If you want to see me play Pokemon live, I am at twitch.tv/Scottish Totodile, as you can see on screen. And I'll be back soon for another one. So thanks so much for watching. Bye bye.